if that's okay for you, Rebecca, with the number. I'll just jump in.
It'll be a nice discussion then.
Yep. I'll just hide this thing from me. Okay. Thanks everybody for joining. So this is our third skills workshop. We are the IGAC ICACGP Early Career Scientific Steering Committee. The committee was established early last year in 2023 after the Manchester IGAC conference. And this is just to engage a bit more with the early career researcher community. The main activities we work on as a committee are around communication. So we have the several social media pages on the left here, if I'm not standing in front of it. And we're trying to engage all ECRs around the world, and with a particular focus on developing nations and underserved scientific communities. We work on engagement. We had organized, for example, the Early Career Conference last year in November with only presentation by ECRs. And we do some outreach as well, combining efforts with other sister organizations such as SOLAS, ILIPS, and LACES. And then we do the career development, such as with this workshop, for example, and just to improve career perspective for early career researchers. Today, we're very grateful to have Professor Rebecca Garland as our speaker, and she will talk or discuss with us about equitable scientific collaborations, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm guessing we're going to hear about the helicopter science. Rebecca is currently working at the University of Pretoria, South Africa, but she did her PhD in atmospheric chemistry at the University of Colorado Boulder, followed by a postdoctoral fellowship at the Max Planck Institute for Chemistry in Germany. And her current research interests, just to give a few, are air quality, climate change, and also involving policy makers. She is one of the founding members. There should be an S here. I'm giving you a lot of credit here, Rebecca. One of the founding members of the ANGA working group of IGAC, which is the working group focusing on Africa. And she is currently, and since 2021, one of the sitting members of the IGAC Scientific Steering Committee. And without further ado, I will give Rebecca the floor and I will stop sharing. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for the introduction. And good morning, very early morning to some people, afternoon, evening, where you are. I'm going to go between my slides and a Mentimeter. So be patient with me sometimes when I have to change things. But thank you for coming today for this discussion on collaboration. Can someone confirm you can hear me okay? Sometimes my Zoom microphone is bad. Is it okay?
Yeah, very clear.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So for everybody who's here, if I could please ask, if you see the Mentimeter code on the screen, either using the QR code or this code, if you go to menti.com, put in this code, you should see a map asking where you're coming from. So I thought first we can just see where everyone is, because unfortunately doing introductions would take a really long time. So I'll leave the QR code up just for a bit, and then I'll switch over so we can see that. Then we have a couple more questions. We'll talk a bit, discuss a bit. I have some questions intermixed in. And throughout the whole time, if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So if everybody does have the code okay, I'm just going to switch my screen over. Yes. I have too many things open. Can you see where I'm saying where you're joining from? Can everybody see the map?
Yeah, we can see the map.
Great, cool. So if you aren't certain of where to go, if you just do menti.com, and then use this code 31648667. And I'll give everybody a couple minutes. I see we do have quite a good spread geographically of where everyone is coming from.
That's also probably also giving, oh, sorry, it's me. I'm just saying you're giving us a good tip for doing presentation that are engaging. Thank you.
Of course. I somehow can't see what I'm always sharing. I forget with Zoom how to set that up. So if I'm ever talking and I'm like, I'm showing you this and you don't see it, please tell me. So again, if you're lost, you can also just scan the QR code. I'll keep that up for just one sec. Cool. All right. So that's nice to know that we have people from different countries, and I see South Africa is also representing here as well. So great. So then I had a couple questions just to start us off, please. They're just simple yes, no. Also, just for us to understand, who's in the room. So the first is just, have you participated in a collaborative project before, please? And again, if you're not certain where to join, you can go to menti.com and use the code here. Oh, look, I can also copy the link and put it in the chat. I wondered who was in the C, Collins. I just saw that. Somebody was joining us on a boat. Okay, great. So not everyone, but many have participated in some sort of collaborative project before. Then the next question is, have you ever initiated? So have you been the one that started a collaborative project? And in this, use collaboration, however, define it and how you will, however you would like to. Okay, cool. So many people have participated, some have initiated, but many haven't yet. So there's fun times ahead for lots of us. And then last, have you ever led such a collaborative project? I suspect those who've initiated, maybe they also led it. Great. So I see we have a really good mix also of different experience as well. So when I developed this presentation, I was thinking of, sure. Can you see my slides again okay?
Yep, clear.
Cool, thanks. When I developed this presentation, I was thinking of, maybe many people who hadn't yet led or initiated one. So I've given some of my thoughts on this. But please, since there are varying levels of experience, if you have questions or inputs as we go, please do. And as I said, I will use Mentimeter throughout. So I made this so you know who I am, but Max already did a great job of saying a bit about my career. So I did my PhD in Boulder, in Colorado, at the university and at NOAA as well. And then I was a postdoc fellow in Mainz, Germany. In my PhD, I was very much in the lab. One small field mission is my postdoc. I did mostly field missions, both for aerosol optical properties and bioaerosols. For my PhD, I did water uptake and hygroscopicity using flow tubes, which I don't know if anybody uses anymore, but I can tell you about that as well. I then was a AAAS Science, Technology, and Policy Fellow. I worked at the the U.S. Department of Energy in Washington, D.C. as an analyst on energy efficiency and renewable energy. So that really, I had always been interested in science policy linkages and how to collaborate with policymakers as a scientist and work with them. And so it was great to work within the government for 2 years. And then very long ago now, I moved to South Africa. I first was a researcher at the CSIR, which is like a national lab here. It's a research council. I was a researcher there for like 11 years. So like I said, quite a long time ago. And now the two pins are on top of each other because I just moved down the street to the University of Pretoria a couple of years ago. So my viewpoint that I'm showing today, really comes from my experiences and my personality as well of how I have found it most fun, let's say, to collaborate. I have put together some resources and I can share those as well on the webpage afterwards, just some interesting articles, some interesting blogs, not all maybe that I agree with or that would work for me, but I found them really helpful as I was developing this presentation. And then also Max noted about my involvement in ANGA. We also have, I saw at least one other ANGA implementation team member on the call, Collins. We are one of the regional working groups under IGAC, and we're focused particularly on Africa. And so the working groups, if this is something you're not as familiar with, I would recommend, you reach out and see, what working groups are working in your area, because they really aim to bring together scientists from that region, as well as those that are interested in working in that region, with the main goal that, the sum is, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So when we come together and form a network, we're much stronger than just individually. The website is at the bottom as well, or if you search for IGAC ANGA, ANGA is the African group on atmospheric science, and it means air in Swahili. But if you go to our website or just Google IGAC ANGA, you'll see where you can join our mailing list. And as I noted, I did collect articles, blog posts that I think are interesting, and I will share them as well. Sorry. Now, I clicked on the chat and now I can't make this go forward. So, as I said, I'd like this to be a discussion. There are a good number of us, I think, that we could have a really interesting discussion. So please, raise your hand or come in if you have questions, or if you also have experiences that you'd like to share or some aspects that you found difficult. Anything, I think, would be really great to hear from everybody today. Because as I said at the beginning, I did read, quite a bit to show as well, but it comes from my viewpoint, particularly my viewpoint here as a researcher in the Global South. So I have a very particular viewpoint on collaboration as well. And as noted in the title and by Max as well in the introductions, I'm really aiming to talk a lot about equitable collaboration. So first we'll talk just kind of general and then really get to this idea of how to develop equitable collaboration. So at least, again, from my experiences. My definition of collaborate is very large. So when I asked, if you'd collaborated before, I said, use whatever definition works for you. I think we collaborate in a lot of different ways. And I kind of define it if I do something outside of the people in my group. Perhaps people have different definitions of that. But I think, when you start to work with somebody who isn't working on the exact topics that you are within your group, so in the exact same environment, you start to collaborate. And that can be interdisciplinary, within our field, within our institutions, across institutions, nationally, internationally. Many collaborations start small. There's some, right, ginormous ones. And it's not just with scientists. We also collaborate, as we know, with industry, community, government, a lot of actors. And there, of course, are specific nuances to dealing, I think, with different audiences or with different collaborations. But as it really is the relationships between people working towards hopefully a common goal, I think a lot, in my experience, is also quite the same. And just as a reminder, hopefully you have this somewhere already up, because there will be more questions, for the Mentimeter as we go. So the first one, and I have to change the slide in order for us to get there, will be just short answers on Mentimeter, or what are the positive aspects that drive you to collaborate? So I'm going to move to the next slide. So what are the positive aspects? Like, why would you want to collaborate? I mean, if you're here and we're going to have this discussion today, I believe it's because you would like to collaborate. So what are the positive things? Like why? What's the drive? I'll copy the voting link again in case people are struggling. Traveling, it is fun to do science elsewhere. Learning something new. Yeah. Mm. Having access to different equipments, new perspectives, new ideas, networking, learning. Yeah. So I will save this Mentimeter as well. Maybe this is something we can also share next, some of the output, because I think this is really interesting. This is really highlighting a lot of the positive things that we think, that are that why we collaborate. And I agree, these are very much the same reasons, that I also really enjoy collaborating. Sorry, it just takes me a second to move between the two. Did everybody see? Yeah, everybody saw. And then the next question, and I'll move it just now. What are the hurdles right now do you feel to develop collaboration? So I'll move the slide. You'll just need to give a second, but I did see many people, right, have collaborated, but maybe didn't initiate, not as many had initiated or led one themselves. Oh, we got more answers. Being criticized. Hopefully that's to move to a positive collaboration then. Hopefully you don't move to a collaboration that criticizes. So what are the hurdles for you to develop collaborations? So many people hadn't yet initiated one or led one themselves. And if not, then, what do you think are some of the challenges, some of the hurdles that have made it so you haven't been able to develop one? Not being a PI? As a graduate student, of course, it's very hard to actually fully develop your own collaboration, but
just on this slide, Rebecca is not letting us enter more than one answer, at least.
Oh, sorry. I wasn't certain if I should do a word cloud or this open answer, and I didn't realize the open answer didn't let you do more than one.
Yeah.
Good to know. Sorry. Sorry, I haven't used Mentimeter since like the pandemic, so it's been a while. Yeah, different policies, yeah. The follow-up, not having enough time, the right people. Yeah. So I think these are challenges, of always developing collaborations, but hopefully today, motivating external collaborators when there's no project or money. Yeah, hopefully we can talk about some of the ways to start to get over, some of these hurdles as well, so that when the first hurdle of not being the PI, when you do start to becoming the PI, maybe some of these won't be as hurdles. But let's see how that conversation goes. So when we talk about why why collaborate? Like I tried to find the cheesiest photo I could because like this is my favorite part of science. It's like, yay, science. You get to go and work with your friends. And hopefully, you get to choose who you collaborate with. You don't have to, of course, go into a bad collaboration. So when it works out, it's great for all the reasons that were noted on that slide. You learn something new, you see a different perspective, you develop good relationships with people, and it's fun. It's just yay science. It's fun to work with other people. And then for example, from my perspective, we really need to collaborate. So this is a slide, don't stress about a lot of it. It's a slide I generally start with when I'm presenting what our group does. And so what our group does is all of these boxes over the side, we do a little bit of it. However, as we'll talk about later on, we're not a big group. We don't have big groups generally in a lot of regions in the Global South. We're small communities. So we don't have expertise in everything. So for example, I talked through what I did for my career. I myself do not have great expertise in working with satellite measurements, but that is a key tool that we need to be able to use in South Africa to understand our atmospheric composition. So then the fun part is I get to go find out who could I collaborate with to help to augment the skills that we do have and to develop those skills in South Africa. So I have joint students working with satellite experts, and so on and so on. And so that makes for that really is one of the critical aspects, I think, for at least myself coming from a research scarce environment, and maybe others of you also who sit in such environments might feel quite similar. Very often we just have to collaborate. And we have to push for equitable collaborations, as we'll talk about towards the end. So I put out some of my ideas why I like to collaborate, but really everyone already kind of listed through them. As I said, it's doing cool science, which we love to do with a friend. And I also really love to apply my knowledge in a new situation. And through that, I think, have impact. I would imagine many of us get into atmospheric science because it is such a relevant field to the problems of our day right now. And sitting in our silos, it's hard to have impact. We really do, I think, need to collaborate in order to have the impact on the key environmental and atmospheric issues, which include air pollution and climate change, which are so large. So I want to talk now some slides on talking about the collaboration journey. You can see I just tried to find fun clip art because I generally don't get to use such fun stuff in normal boring science presentations. But I thought this was quite apt. It's not quite a staircase. It's never smooth sailing. There are ups and downs. And I would say in the collaboration journey, kind of the middle here is maybe when the project starts, maybe up a bit more because you start to feel really happy. But that's not, of course, the end goal. There's the formulation of the collaboration, the actual, project, you get it, you move forward, but developing and keeping that collaboration strong through one project or more is probably a lot of the work as well. So one aspect, of course, to start with is how do you find someone? And that's one of the key parts to start with. And luckily, this session comes right after Langley's session last time of it's your network. It's the people that you know. And so all the skills that she discussed in the last session really are applicable to how do we find somebody here. And I think how you go about finding different people to work with also depends on your personality. As I said, these perspectives are mine. Like I feel some people don't mind doing cold calls, people they don't know. I get very nervous about those things. So I prefer to use linkages within my network, even if there's somebody I know I want to collaborate with, to find somebody who knows somebody. I also found, particularly when I was starting out as a more emerging career, an early career researcher, is I would collaborate mostly with other early career researchers. Because those are the people that you know, those are the people that you work with, and those are the people very often that you trust. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. A really strong team of early career researchers can take on really tough problems altogether. And Twitter, before it turned to X, was also, I think, a good place to meet a lot of people, but there's other ways on social media as well. I don't know if there's any ideas also as we talk about this from people on the call, if there's other ways that they found successful to find somebody to collaborate with, if anybody'd like to chime in.
I'm going to put my camera on.
Go for it.
I was going to ask you, you just mentioned collaborating primarily with early career researchers earlier in your career. How does that look like when we're all recruited under very specific projects, and so it's kind of difficult to branch out beyond what we're already meant to be doing and definitely go and seek other ECRs who also have their own quite narrow, closed projects. Do you understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was thinking of my time when I first started as a research scientist at CSIR. So it was my postdoc. So it was my very first role. I didn't collaborate scientifically in a funded way with other ECRs. the work that I did, I would say, was still collaborative with the field missions, and that's who you would work with, would be the early career researchers. So myself, when I started at the CSIR, okay, I was, a few years after my PhD because I had taken some time off, but I just felt more comfortable asking then, going across the collaborators I was starting to meet in South Africa. I felt much more comfortable working with those who were also, in their first job after their PhD type of thing. But I think you can develop your network and your friends during your postdoc. I actually just am getting a project now of people. We hadn't worked together since my postdoc, which was very long ago now. And we just got a project together because we knew each other way back when. So also, I think with these, you don't know, it's about the social relationships and keeping those strong as well. And more calls are coming out as well, I think, for specifically growth of early career researchers. If you have your own funding, that would be difficult, but I suspect many PIs also would do not mind more money coming in if there's, if for example, you can still do your role and transition to a different role in a different project.
Cheers.
And as I always say, so I get very nervous. I said this is like my personality. I always call that first conversation a first date. And I tell myself that because I get nervous writing that email, even to this day, like, do you want to work with me? It feels very much to me like senior primary school, like, do you like me? Check yes, check no. So if you find yourself getting nervous, just remember, like, it's just like a first date. I'm sure you've been nervous on a first date before. Like, it happens. Just go through that nervousness. And mostly people hopefully are very nice to that. And one thing I learned very recently was also, one thing I learned the negative impacts of very recently was here at the university, there was a lot of discussion of some faculty not being promoted because it wasn't obvious that they had developed their own independent career past their supervisor. And so I just wanted to highlight that here as well, that it is a nice place to start to collaborate with your supervisor or people related to your supervisor. That's where we feel comfortable. But as you go and try to develop your own career, it is really important to also start to expand your network past that as well. And I hadn't even thought, but there was a long discussion in our faculty of how to really support more junior researchers to not just only work with their supervisor, because then it's not seen that, as you want to get promoted yourself, that you have your own network. That is, if promotion in the academic world is what you are looking for success. It's not necessarily what everybody is either, as well. So then I was trying to think, like, what could this first date, if you're talking with a first date, what could it look like? And I think you can have this conversation at many different times. So very often, right, at a conference, it starts with, hey, we should work together. What do you think about this? Our skills, what you presented is interesting. It kind of relates to what I do, particularly when you then have a position, if you can start to supervise students and at least here in South Africa in the universities, you can supervise a student. If you're a PhD student, you can still supervise an MSc student if you had time for such things. We could co-supervise a student. We could collaborate on a proposal. You could join our project if there's a project where a collaborator could join even afterwards. I think there's lots of different times with projects and activities. If you find somebody and you see a really strong collaboration, to try to develop that and work on that. And I would note, one thing that I've noted, at least in my own career, is that the we should work together conversation, it's always fun. It's really nice. But to really move to action, I've always found having something concrete helps. And I think, and somebody had mentioned something quite similar to that of, one of the hurdles was, I believe it was, of external collaborators. If they don't have money, then it's really difficult, right? If it's just an idea that you're starting to develop together, it's hard to keep everybody motivated. Because another hurdle of not having time also then comes in. The things that are funded, the other aspects start to take our attention. So having something concrete, and even if it's little, which is why starting sometimes, if you can co-supervise a student, or if you have an idea for a paper to write or something to write, something to get the collaboration together and growing. I found, and even with developing networks, kind of helps to solidify a bit. And that said, these things do also take time. Like I said, we just got some funding, or it looks like we're getting some funding with people I met. I'm not going to tell you how long ago, but in my postdoc. So sometimes it takes time as well. And also remember, ghosting can happen. It is a first date. Not all first dates go well. I would, caution, I'm sure we've all been guilty of this as well. Sometimes we don't mean to ghost. Sometimes, right, we're just busy, we're absent-minded. It's not a priority. And particularly if it's one of these discussions of let's just collaborate on something. Sometimes if there's nothing concrete, that could fizzle out. And I would recommend don't get too discouraged by that. And that bad dates also can happen as well. Maybe collaborations won't work out. And I saw in one of the reasons to collaborate was, because of getting criticism. And I assume that's from not collaborating. And I really feel it's your collaboration, it's your network, it's your career. You can decide who to collaborate with and who not to collaborate with, as well as you develop your projects, as you develop the type of network that you want as well. I am putting the ghosting here also because sometimes when we don't have a lot of time, we accidentally ghost and we don't mean to, and maybe some people do mean to as well. Are there any kind of other thoughts? So this is my thought of, how first could you meet somebody, thinking about the first dates? Are there any questions, thoughts? Yes, I see Max.
Yeah, I've got a question, and it's maybe more related to the slide before. You said moving to something concrete. At what point do you put on paper an actual agreement for what the collaboration is going to look like, and what are the responsibilities for the people involved, and making sure not all the work end up on one? I mean, something I've seen quite a lot of times in different places, particularly with the public versus public organization and universities, like all the data is collected on one side and all of it is analyzed and published on another. And it can lead to some frustrations. So I'm just, like all the formal side of the collaboration.
So between science, I would say that that's something to think about differently. I would not think it's the same answer for all collaboration. So firstly, from my experience as a scientist in the Global South, I do not like to have expectations put on me when there is no funding for me. And perhaps for scientists in the Global North, that sounds strange, but we are so resource constrained. If we do something for free, we get asked to do things for free a lot. And we have to really pick and choose what we can do for free. So if early on, unless, it was somebody I probably had a close relationship with and I understood why they were asking me to put down expectations without funding, I would not like that, to be honest, something formal. That said, if it's working in a collaboration with governments, I have done those and I would recommend, for example, like you said, where data is public and then private universities assess it. I do put something that they would want in writing earlier. Because you can get taken advantage of. The government will want all of your time to do everything for free. And so if this is something you're doing because you're interested in and there's no funding, then it protects you from not doing everything that they want. So I see those types of agreements, getting things down in writing, as when I feel comfortable, either myself saying, yes, you can hold me to these expectations, or when I want to hold the other partner, for example, the government, to certain expectations. And it doesn't even have to be formal, I would say, depending again on your audience. Between scientists, often we are more informal. But with the government, it also can be clear that, okay, if there's no funding behind this, this is what I plan to do, and this is kind of where it stops. I think a conversation is always helpful. But again, if between scientists, if I get asked to have very strict expectations without funding, I generally don't have the time nor capacity to do that. But if somebody asked me that, I could also tell them, right? So it's not, I think communication is just really important.
Cool.
Will,
Will you explore a bit more? Oh, I'll let go back. But the whole Global South and funding, are you going to talk about? Okay, because
yes, that's the last half. But I see we're getting close. Yes, we should get going, huh? Kwabena, I see your hand.
Yeah, I want to share something I have experienced with collaboration from Ghana here. There was a point I was invited in a short meeting, which was very informal. I was never informed whether the project was funded or not funded. So I designed a whole methodology for the project. Then later did I know that it was a funded project. So I made inquiries. So all these contributions that I've made, have you included me in the project? Then they said no. So in fact, I became very angry because more or less I've designed everything at putting a request for equipment that we're going to use for the project and everything. So from what Rebecca is saying, before you enter into any collaboration, there should be a clear-cut information about what the funding is about, then the contributions that you're going to give in, how they are going to acknowledge you, because it's very important as we develop our career. So for funded projects, that's what I've experienced in. Then sometimes we have PhD students who are conducting some projects and going through the net, they realize that perhaps you might have worked in that area. So in that case, you can seek for your support. That one, you have to also communicate with other co-supervisors to see whether, in fact, they would like you to be on board, because it's very important. For example, I have one PhD student who just sent me an email that he has read some of my papers and he's working on related stuff, and he pleads with me to support the supervision of his work. And it was accepted, and we are doing very well. Personally, we have not met. Meetings, we discuss whenever we are having a progress report on the project. And even now, I think he's supposed to do some presentation on Aeronet in the US, Baltimore or something during June or so. So for the collaboration, I always see if it's a student, we should be quite flexible, especially those of us who are professors and who are supervisors, we should be flexible. But when it comes to funded projects, I think that one, we should really get a clear cut of our input, what we're going to get, because we need funding also for our projects. So that is my experience.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm sorry, you definitely were taken advantage of there. And while we're talking about this, I also put up 2 more questions. I'm trying to make a word cloud of what is a successful collaboration. But I agree that from the beginning with the discussions, that first date, if it comes up that it's for a specific proposal, you need to have the roles outlined. And also throughout, be your own advocate. No one else, right, is necessarily going to be your advocate. So we've all been in that situation, unfortunately. I've been in that situation as well, Kwabena, and it doesn't feel good. And yeah, so getting agreement early, particularly with the funding, that is not right to take advantage. So I do see I need to get to the equitable stuff, the equitable ones. So we can see different ideas for the successful collaboration. A lot of it publication, impact, knowledge growth. And what do you think are the really key aspects needed for a successful collaboration?
Is it to the floor?
So it should be, if you should be able to do the next question on mentee. The key aspects needed. Is it not working? There we go. Responsibility, commitment, flexibility, social skills, yes. And we do have to remember scientists are not always strong with our social skills, which has an impact on our collaborations with each other and with others as well.
Can I relate two questions that are in the chat, which you might not have seen. So one was, how do we professionally deal with being ghosted? Sometimes people get busy, but do we move on or should one reach out? And the other one, slightly related, how do you deal with telling the truth in collaborations? A communication issue, question mark?
So I would say with being ghosted, you have to draw the line where you are, where you feel most comfortable. So definitely follow up. Follow up as many times as you feel, somebody should answer by that. One thing, I can be absent-minded myself. It does not mean that I am absent-minded in all of my projects, but I do think if you follow up many times, and it's very difficult to get information out of somebody, that they're also showing themselves what type of collaborator they might be, right? To give people the benefit of the doubt, again, if there's not funding attached, it's sometimes hard to give your attention to it, but still, if you want to collaborate with somebody, you should be responsive to them. Sorry, what was the second question, Max?
How do you deal with
telling the
telling the
truth?
truth? Yeah.
I think you have to. So I'm putting here some of what I think are the key aspects. I really do want to get to this equity conversation, and we're running out of time. Sorry. I think communication is key. So these are what I see are some of the really key aspects of a collaboration. So being very transparent throughout the full process and really pushing other collaborators to be. Also communication. As scientists, egos get in the way a lot with collaboration. And so you also have to think through your own ego as a scientist when you are collaborating, and not to let it get in the way. People, these are personal relationships. And so you do want to be an advocate, but are you feeling, a negative way because of your ego or because of, having a mistreatment as well? Those are two different responses to that. And so to be flexible as well, but to set expectations at the start. Realize that we are humans, and so as collaborations are personal relationships, you have to be flexible, but clear expectations at the start and reinforce these and then agree together if they're going to change. So I think with the truth, you have to communicate. Open communication is key. And then equitable. All right, and failure will happen. And also I'd say within collaboration, try to make time and space for the collaboration itself. And a lot of times in projects, we don't do this, particularly when we have across institutions, across cultures, across disciplines. Like, spend time to develop the relationships. Have it within there to have team meetings. Even though we hate meetings, we need to understand each other. We need to learn each other. We need to ask questions. I see Tammy is here from Northwest University. She's been in meetings with me with a project with soil scientists where I ask the most basic soil science questions because I have to understand they're part of our team. So just, really make time for this collaboration. I think it's a mistake we make very often. One of the guides that I found was a guide for early career researchers by early career researchers, this research collaborations. These are some of their top tips. I'm going to go past this right now just so we can get to the equitable discussion. But this will be one of the resources that's there. So to switch over to this, I found this one of the potential challenges in this blog article of collaboration. So barrier to communications, different alignment, ensuring equitable distribution of funds. So that could be a potential challenge, and author credits. I highlighted this in red because resources aren't equal. So resources aren't equal. This is R&D expenditure for high income, low income, low middle, upper middle income. The R&D resources aren't equal across countries. This comes from one of our recent opinion papers of percent of GDP on R&D. Eastern Asia, Europe, Latin America, Caribbean, Sub-Saharan Africa. How many of us are in the field per million inhabitants? Where we sit, Latin America, things aren't equal. We wish they were. We hope the gap closes. Resources aren't equal. Support staff aren't equal. Infrastructure are not equal. I'll go past that one. So to me, the question with equitable relationships is, yes, we want this gap to close, but we live in a world where things aren't equal, and we don't see the situation changing drastically. So how do we still have equitable partnerships within these inequalities, inequities? From the paper that I just showed, we discussed different types of scientific relationships. This comes from, I'll put these papers also in that resources, the ideas of how to develop an equitable relationship. So the first, there's 3 different types listed here. One is exploitative, transactional, and transformational. And we'll dig into these quickly just now. Sorry, I'm not going to do the Mentimeter right now. So the next slides are taken directly from this article. There's an article, if we've ever talked together about this issue, I have recommended that you read, and we'll put it in there. This is the Safari 2000 campaign, which is one of the seminal campaigns, though it's old now, in Southern Africa about atmospheric science. And one of the goals of this project was also to develop equitable collaborations. And so this piece is written with the thinking of how did they aim to do this? And these are relationships, again, that to this day, the people who worked on this, I did not, still have strong collaborations. This talks a lot about science diplomacy. Science diplomacy is another term for how scientific teamwork can happen between nations to solve societal problems, and also how diplomacy can open doors for scientific cooperation. Just so when we talk about science diplomacy, to me, it's very often just multinational, across international collaborations. So these are a lot of words. I took them directly from this paper, but I highlighted the key aspects. So first off, exploitative. And I think in atmospheric science, we see this often, and this is really where helicopter science happens. So helicopter science being a more resourced nation, scientists come in, do the work. They have, you can see what I highlighted, preset scientific agendas, finalized budgets, and they come in just to collect data. This can be on the ground. I'd argue this can also be with satellites. Not that satellites are doing helicopter science just by nature, but the data are there. And that they don't really do anything with host countries. Maybe we get footnote acknowledgement if we're in that. Such projects engender mistrust and are damaging, of course. Transactional can be a little bit different, but still, there's very little effort to engage local scientists as partners or to nurture students. Very often, the planning and the budgeting take place somewhere else. Such a transactional could have some income, but they aren't equitable. The collaboration itself, there isn't leadership on both sides. And so in here they say, can leave a sense of deprivation, exploitation, distrust. I highlighted these words because I'm really hoping this is not the community we want to build, right? This is not the atmospheric science community I want to be part of, where people are feeling deprived, exploited, and not having trust. However, it happens, and it happens a lot. And I think a lot of researchers don't always realize that they're doing it, even with the best intentions. So I put some examples here because some are very clear, right? I think some helicopter science, it's very obvious when somebody's doing it, not always obvious to them, unfortunately, but hopefully as we're discussing it more, it becomes. Some might be more nuanced. So from my perspective, first off, your collaborators aren't your travel agents. Even if you're going someplace else, they have a role past travel agent. Expecting the involvement from the less resourced as in-kind support. This happens very often due to the funding inequities. Funding from the US, from Europe, can't always be spent within, for example, South Africa, but that's not also a reason to have an exploitative or transactional relationship. Then we need to find ways to move past that. We can't expect under-resourced countries to give a lot of in-kind support. Shorter term or once-off activities instead of longer-term resource. And this is something we see often. There's a lot of money for capacity building in Africa. There's less money for research in Africa. I would also say be sensitive about picking someone's brain. Now, this perhaps is a little different from an early career researcher. It's very often you're picking somebody's brain because you want to understand the field better. And myself, I will gladly talk to you about that for hours, longer than you want me to. This is what I'm talking about, is I have a PI in the global north trying to figure out the situation here, and then they go and make a proposal, not even as bad as what you said, but similar to that, right? They go make a proposal, and I'm not part of it after you've taken I've been here a long time, like a decade of expertise for free. And And this isn't to say that these conversations aren't important, but if you're in the other side of that than I am, asking to pick somebody's brain, think about why. Is this mutually beneficial? Again, for an early career researcher, I do think it's different because you're picking my brain for a different reason. This I'm talking about trying to get expertise of an area to then go use it for yourself. And then a reminder that ensuring continuous measurements take a lot of work. I know that in the US and Europe, we have these wonderful measurements, that are run by public institutions, more than just those areas. But the first measurements and running continuous measurements for scientific takes a lot of work. And to me, an air quality technician who kept your measurements running for a year in really difficult situations should be an author on a paper. Shouldn't be just in the acknowledgements. So these are some of the ones that I've seen. One of the questions we see very often is, well, first off, a lot of journals now are moving to asking, if you worked somewhere, why didn't you have local researchers involved? And I haven't read a lot of papers that have come to this, but many of the answers are, and fair enough, how do I link? I couldn't find anybody. Couldn't find any scientists in the region. And I have already said, right, there aren't many of us. We are generally in the global south, much smaller communities. I do think for our community, a really good place to start are our working groups. We can see the African working group, the Americas working group, China, Japan, Southern Hemisphere, the Asian Oceania network. So a lot of the areas where there's helicopter science happening, there are regional working groups to try to figure out who can work together, who to collaborate with this. And if in a country there is not that expertise, well, they still have air quality issues. They still have climate change issues. Can we find a way to help to build that expertise, to build that community? Because just ignoring the local community isn't going to help, right, that country. So that's what we've said before. These are the exploitative and the transactional. And very often, this is taken again from this paper, in the context of scientific relationships between developed and developing regions. If scientists of the developed world follow the business as usual model, the result is likely to be exploitative at worst or transactional at best. And neither of these are good. And grants do restrict the possibility because funding is inequitable. But that's not changing. I haven't seen that change yet. It is more difficult when resources are not equal. That is a typo. This is more difficult than if resources were equal, but we do have inequities and we still want equitable partnerships. And so I think we need to move past and think, how can we have such transformative relationships? So transformative scientific relationship identified here is the parties share responsibility for planning, decision-making, funding, operations, and evaluation of activities, where each institution is transformed through the relationship. When one member is at risk of exploitation between a significant weaker power and resources, such shared responsibility is crucial, and that's needed for science diplomacy. Sorry, I'm checking time here. So to me, the key aspect between a transformative relationship, it's the leadership. It is acknowledging the collaboration, that we have equals, that we both have expertise. So how do we have equitable partnerships with such inequities? I think a key aspect to collaborate, if you are in such power dynamics, is to acknowledge this and ask this. And I've been discussing this just with global north, global south. But this happens, I think, with senior researcher, junior researcher. This can happen with researchers and communities as well, right? That it could be exploitative or transactional when a researcher does work in a community. There are many ways when there's a power differential that it is easier to not have an equitable or transformational relationship. But I think we all want one. We don't want a community that is full of distrust or feeling exploited as well. And that's actually where I was kind of ending with this, is going through those different types of relationships. And now I realized that, and I wanted to highlight that the equitable collaboration goes across different power dynamics, because I think also as early career researchers, even if you're in the global north, there can be the power dynamics through that. And these types of words and these types of thinking, I think also really does apply to that. And I'm really happy that this is much more a conversation than it ever was when I was in a PhD postdoc or more of an early career researcher. Because hopefully then, you know, when you all start to get lots and lots of grants and do amazing work, that we can focus more on equitable relationships between different areas with different power dynamics. Because to me, it's harder. It's a lot harder. It takes so much more time to develop this. It takes so much more effort to do it. But if on the one hand, there's mistrust, people feeling exploited, and the other, there's a community that we want. And we are developing this community. So hopefully you agree that it's worth it. Sorry, I know we're running out of time. That's at 11, actually. So I'll leave it there. But I would be, if people do have time, I'd be really interested to hear any feedback. I do have time to stay on, if that's okay. Is that no? You have to go.
No.
Okay.
Actually the session can run until the half past because we have the sort of coffee half hour discussion for people wanting to hang out. But I wanted to ask, I see one of the challenges that is probably experienced from the culprit side, let's say, of people not doing equitable collaboration is that you know, the more the collaboration expected would be reliant on bigger funding, but the bigger funding relies on grants which are more difficult to get, and therefore when the odds of getting a funding to do collaborations are low, say through the European Research Council grants or the I'm sure the NSF is the same in the US, and we've got something similar in Australia that has a 2 to 5% success rate. Because you're so unlikely to get the funding and you have to apply so long before even getting the money, then you don't go and discuss the project you're writing up with the people you should be collaborating with if the project comes up, or the end users. Because at the end, you mentioned a point which I had not even thought about it, which is the communities impacted beyond just science by the work that you're doing and not including them. How do you cope with that when you're very unsure about getting your project up based on funding, and therefore you don't involve the people you should be involving during the preparation of the project?
So, I mean, I would say first, I thought of a few things when you're asking this. We have a fixed goal of what we would want the perfect project to look like. And the perfect project starts with discussions from the very beginning. If it is a project in South Africa with somebody in Australia, that we develop this idea together, right? I mean, that is what we want to happen. Life is not perfect, and we also understand that. And so I would also say, when you're saying that some of these like projects to actually fund a transformational collaboration are very few and far between. Many of us never gets many of those, if any of those, in our career. But I think that's where the communication comes in. I, as a South African researcher in the Global South, I know that I realize that money from the US and Europe, for example, can't come here. But I also can think of creative ways that we can collaborate through joint students, through could you fund to bring your instrument over here that, but it's not coming from them bringing their instrument over here without asking me. It is discussing together, this could happen. So I do think acknowledging this with who you'd like to collaborate and having a discussion of how could we collaborate? I have, like, if there's this one funding, but it's only going to fund my side, perhaps there is a co-funding in the country, probably not. But then is there a way we could collaborate? Because we can still think of, well, what do we need in order to contribute to this, to take the first step? For the larger grants, I do think, unfortunately, a lot of times you do have to take the time to talk to the people that you want to collaborate with the communities, particularly if it's supposed to be an interactive, where they are also going to be part of the project. That was our key aspects to try to do beforehand. Things happen. So I would say, with the question earlier, just be truthful, right? And come like, look, okay, we didn't do this perfectly. We are here now. We do have this funding now. Is there a way that we can collaborate? We also understand, right? At least the scientists, that you get busy. And if we, and I would think if as a community we strive at least to try to go to the best, the perfect, at least we're moving in that direction and away from some of the really bad helicopter science that we can see. Yeah, I mean, how I handle those things is I swear a lot at home because I know the types of situations you're talking about. And other than speaking truth to power, as you've said, right? I mean, confronting the person, it's hard to, if it's within the government, that's difficult, right? And we know dealing with the government and getting people to change their views, that's probably not going to work. And that's one of the times that I do very often swallow my ego and, try to think of how to develop this in a constructive way. Not all collaborations are easy, not all collaborations, but if they're worth it in the end to you, to do it, and you can walk away at any point, I think as well, that sometimes we do have to swallow our ego and be flexible and understand where the other people are coming from. Particularly, I find this with, as a Global South researcher, again, with, communities, with government and aspects like that. I understand what you're feeling about, and I think that's why it's important for other Global North researchers to also stand up, because very often we complain a lot about it a lot, but I think, I don't know, and perhaps other people, on the call as well can say, I feel sometimes it takes, other well-resourced labs to tell each other, like, stop doing this. Like, look, do you see what you're doing? I think we all have to hold each other accountable and not just put it on us. There's not as many of us in the Global South to hold the Global North accountable on issues like that. And I do think, Collins, and I forgot to say this, we do say this in that article I noticed, our opinion piece in ACP, that, there's many reasons to do equitable collaborations. And one of the aspects is that I truly believe many researchers come to other countries to have an impact. Like, I think that comes very often with very good intentions. But just from my experience here, a scientist coming from the Global North here, you're not going to make an impact if you don't understand the issues, and you're not going to understand the issues if you don't work with a local researcher. And so these good intentions of coming to try to help, and I still believe many people do have good intentions, they're not going to come to fruition, just to be honest, right? If you don't work with somebody here, because we know the priorities, we know what is actually a gap. Just some thoughts if other people have some as well. Yeah, Max.
Just like you were saying, how like using other institute to tell others that what they're doing is wrong, which is that where we're at now by having that sort of topic like front and center at IGAC, EGU, AGU. It's being brought up quite a bit at the moment, and it feels like we've reached that point where we're now pointing the finger at this sort of behavior and saying like, come on, let's be better now.
I hope so. And I hope that it continues. And I even just by shining a light on it, right? I did hear that. So PLOS quite a while ago you had to fill in, when you publish an article, right? You had to say why you didn't work with local researchers if you didn't. And I heard that AGU now is as well. And I think ACP and Copernicus rather is going to add it as well. And even though it doesn't mean anything will be rejected or not, it shines a light and you have to put into words. And even if it's whatever their reason is, perhaps then it gives some time to think about it, right? Where we wouldn't have thought about it in the past. So I'm hopeful. And it's a part of the conversation. And so then we can go forward and do better.
Has anyone else got comments? If not, I guess thanks a lot, Becky, for taking the time to chat with us about this topic. I will quickly go back to sharing my screen regarding, so this was today's workshop, if I can get control. Next month, we seem to have lined up Professor Meng Gao from the Hong Kong Baptist University in China, who will speak on July 5th. We're just still confirming the topic and the exact time so that we can create the event and share it with all of you. And with that brings to a close the regular workshop. So I will stop